Most people think leaving the solar system is the hard part, getting out, escaping the sun's gravity, crossing the boundary between the heliosphere and interstellar space. That is the challenge, the vast distance, the long journey, the enormous energy required to achieve escape velocity. Once you have done that, the thinking goes, you are free. You are in interstellar space. The solar system is behind you, and whatever comes next is simply a matter of time and distance. This intuition is wrong in almost every specific way that matters. Leaving the solar system, in the sense of crossing the heliopause, the boundary where the solar wind meets the interstellar medium, is not the end of the danger. It is, in some respects, the beginning of a different and, in certain ways, more severe set of hazards. The interstellar medium through which any future mission would travel is not benign. It is not simply empty space waiting to be crossed. It is an environment with specific physical properties, radiation fields, particle populations, magnetic structures that present challenges for any spacecraft and catastrophic risks for any human crew that are fundamentally different from, and in some respects worse than, the challenges of the inner solar system. And the solar system itself, the region between here and the heliopause, is not the relatively safe environment that the successful Voyager missions might suggest. The Voyagers were robotic spacecraft with no crew to protect and no requirement to complete the journey within any human timescale. The specific hazards they encountered, radiation, the deep cold, the communication delays, the gradual power loss, were manageable for machines designed to survive for decades. For human beings attempting to make the same journey, the calculation is completely different. Tonight we're going to examine the specific dangers of leaving the solar system, not in general terms, but in the concrete physical detail that makes the challenge genuinely understood. The radiation environment at different distances from the Sun, and what it does to human biology over the timescales required for an interstellar mission. The problem of galactic cosmic rays, the highest energy particles in the known universe, and why they represent a threat that no amount of shielding can fully mitigate. The specific hazards of the heliospheric boundary region itself. The communication and navigation challenges that increase dramatically with distance. The psychological dimensions of extreme isolation over timescales without precedent in human experience. And then, what lies beyond. What the interstellar medium actually is, what it does to spacecraft and crews, and what the specific physical environment of the space between stars means for the long-term future of human interstellar travel. Before we begin, if you put this on because the night is long and you need something to settle into, stay. The dangers of leaving the solar system are more specific and more interesting than most treatments suggest. This is worth understanding properly. Let us start with the most fundamental challenge, the one that confronts any mission to leave the solar system before it even begins to address the specific hazards of deep space. The problem of time. The nearest star to the Sun is Proxima Centauri, approximately 4.24 light-years away. A light-year is the distance light travels in 1 year, approximately 9.46 trillion kilometers. At the speed of light, the journey would take 4.24 years. But no human-made object has approached the speed of light. The fastest human-made objects ever built, spacecraft using gravitational assists from the planets, achieve speeds of perhaps 20 to 25 kilometers per second. The Parker Solar Probe, at its closest solar approach, reaches approximately 195 kilometers per second, the fastest any human-made object has ever traveled. At 195 kilometers per second, A journey to Proxima Centauri would take approximately 6,500 years. This is not a solvable problem with current technology. It is not a matter of making the rocket bigger or the engine more efficient by modest factors. The energy required to accelerate a spacecraft massive enough to support a human crew to speeds comparable to even a small fraction of the speed of light, say 10%, is extraordinary. The kinetic energy of a 1,000 kilogram spacecraft moving at 10% of the speed of light is approximately 4.5 times 10 to the 17 joules, comparable to the total energy released by approximately 100,000 nuclear weapons of the Hiroshima yield. Generating and directing that energy into propulsion is not a near-term engineering challenge. It is a challenge that requires physics and engineering capabilities we do not currently possess. The consequence of this timescale problem is that any mission leaving the solar system with current or near-future technology would require human beings to spend years, potentially decades or centuries, in space before arriving at the nearest star. And during those years, they would be exposed to the specific hazards of deep space without the possibility of return or resupply within any reasonable timescale. This makes the danger calculation for leaving the solar system fundamentally different from the calculation for any mission within the solar system. For a Mars mission, approximately 9 months in transit each way, the accumulated radiation dose, the physiological effects of microgravity, and the psychological impacts of isolation are severe but potentially manageable. For a mission to leave the solar system at realistic speeds, the same factors accumulate over decades rather than months, transforming manageable challenges into potentially insurmountable ones. Let us now talk about the first and most fundamental physical hazard of deep space: radiation. Because the radiation environment that a crew would experience on a mission leaving the solar system is qualitatively different from the radiation environment in low Earth orbit, or even on a Mars mission, and the difference is not merely one of degree. Within the Earth's magnetosphere, astronauts on the International Space Station receive a radiation dose of approximately 1 millisievert per day, roughly equivalent to receiving a chest X-ray every single day. This is elevated compared to Earth's surface, where the magnetosphere and atmosphere provide substantial shielding. But it is manageable for stays of up to a year, and the cumulative career doses for ISS astronauts remain within NASA's acceptable limits. Beyond the Earth's magnetosphere, in interplanetary space, the radiation environment changes significantly. Two main sources of radiation become relevant. The first is solar energetic particles, SEPs, intense bursts of high-energy particles produced by solar flares and coronal mass ejections. These events can produce acute high radiation doses over hours to days. A large solar proton event can deliver a potentially lethal dose to an unprotected human in the space of a few hours. Inside the solar system, solar energetic particle events are a known hazard, with partial mitigations available. Spacecraft can be designed with protected shelters, small volumes surrounded by water or polyethylene shielding that attenuates the proton flux. Space weather forecasting systems can provide advance warning of hours when a large coronal mass ejection is observed at the Sun, giving crew members time to shelter. The danger is real, but it is a danger with partial countermeasures. The second radiation source is galactic cosmic rays, GCRs, and this is where the situation becomes qualitatively different and significantly more dangerous than most popular discussions acknowledge. Galactic cosmic rays are high-energy charged particles, primarily protons and heavier nuclei, accelerated to extremely high energies by supernova shockwaves and other energetic processes in the galaxy. They arrive at the solar system from all directions continuously. Unlike solar energetic particles, which are episodic and come from a specific direction, galactic cosmic rays are isotropic. They arrive from all directions simultaneously and continuous. They never stop. Inside the heliosphere, galactic cosmic rays are partially modulated. The solar wind and the heliospheric magnetic field deflect and absorb some fraction of the cosmic ray flux. This modulation is energy dependent. Low-energy cosmic rays are more strongly modulated than high-energy ones, and it varies with the solar cycle, with more modulation during solar maximum and less during solar minimum. The dose rate from galactic cosmic rays in interplanetary space, at Earth's distance from the Sun, is approximately 1 to 2 millisieverts per day, depending on the solar cycle phase. This is already comparable to the total radiation dose from all sources on the ISS. For a Mars mission of approximately 18 months, the accumulated GCR dose is on the order of 500 to 700 millisieverts, significant but below the NASA career limit of 1000 millisieverts. For a mission that goes beyond the heliopause, crossing into interstellar space, the GCR dose rate increases substantially. Voyager measurements outside the heliopause show that the galactic cosmic ray flux is approximately 2 to 3 times higher than in interplanetary space. The heliosphere provides significant shielding against GCRs. Removing it by travelling into interstellar space means accepting a correspondingly higher dose rate. At the interstellar GCR dose rate of approximately 3 to 6 millisieverts per day, a mission lasting even 1 year in interstellar space would accumulate approximately 1000 to 2000 millisieverts, at or beyond NASA's career limit in a single year. A mission lasting decades would accumulate doses far beyond any currently established safe limit. But the dose rate is only part of the problem. The biological hazard of galactic cosmic rays is not adequately captured by the total dose in sieverts, a unit that was developed to characterize the biological effectiveness of radiation sources encountered on Earth, and that systematically underestimates the hazard of the specific radiation types found in deep space. Galactic cosmic rays include heavy ions, nuclei of elements from carbon to iron and beyond, stripped of their electrons and accelerated to near light speeds. When these heavy ions pass through biological tissue, they deposit energy in dense tracks, straight lines of concentrated ionization damage that are qualitatively different from the diffuse ionization produced by gamma rays or protons. The damage from a single ion nucleus travelling at near light speed is not comparable to the damage from the same amount of energy deposited by X-rays. The dense ionization track produces clustered DNA damage, multiple breaks in close proximity, that is particularly difficult for cellular repair mechanisms to fix correctly. The specific biological consequences of prolonged heavy ion exposure include, in addition to the elevated cancer risk captured by the sievert dose metric, damage to the central nervous system. Experiments with mice exposed to simulated galactic cosmic ray ion beams have shown that relatively modest exposures produce cognitive deficits, impairments in learning, memory, and decision-making that would not be predicted from the sievert dose alone. The underlying mechanism appears to involve direct damage to neurons and to the dendrites that connect them, producing permanent structural changes in the brain that impair function. In humans on a years-long interstellar mission, the accumulated heavy ion dose would be sufficient, based on extrapolation from animal studies, to produce measurable cognitive decline. The specific magnitude of the effect is uncertain, because no human has been exposed to the full interstellar GCR spectrum for years on end, and direct extrapolation from animal studies to humans involves significant uncertainties. But the direction is unambiguous. Prolonged exposure to the galactic cosmic ray flux would impair the cognitive function of the crew in ways that become progressively more serious over the duration of the mission. This is a problem that more shielding does not solve. Unlike solar energetic particles, which are relatively low-energy protons that can be stopped by modest amounts of hydrogen-rich shielding, galactic cosmic ray heavy ions are so energetic that adding more shielding can actually make things worse rather than better. When a high-energy heavy ion strikes a shielding nucleus, it produces a shower of secondary particles, including neutrons, protons, and lighter ions, that can deliver more dose to the crew than the primary particle would have if it had passed through unobstructed. The optimal shield thickness for minimizing GCR dose is counterintuitively thin, a few grams per square centimeter of hydrogen-rich material. And beyond that optimal thickness, adding more shielding increases the dose rather than decreasing it. The physics of GCR shielding places a fundamental limit on how much the GCR hazard can be mitigated by passive shielding alone. This limit is not set by engineering capability or material availability. It is set by the physics of high-energy particle interactions with matter. No amount of engineering can overcome a fundamental physical constraint. The only effective mitigation for GCR exposure is to minimize the duration of the mission, to get from origin to destination as quickly as possible, so that the accumulated dose remains within tolerable limits. But minimizing duration requires high speeds, and high speeds require propulsion systems that do not currently exist. The radiation problem and the propulsion problem are therefore tightly coupled. Solving one without solving the other does not make the mission safe. Let us now talk about the heliospheric boundary region specifically, about the specific hazards that exist in the region between the termination shock and the heliopause, and what any mission would encounter in crossing this region. The termination shock, the inner boundary of the heliospheric boundary region, is located at approximately 80 to 100 astronomical units from the Sun. This is where the supersonic solar wind slows to subsonic speeds due to the increasing pressure of the interstellar medium. Beyond the termination shock, the solar wind plasma becomes turbulent and heated. The decelerated solar wind fills the heliosheath in a disordered, turbulent state before reaching the heliopause. Within the heliosheath, the magnetic field becomes disordered, unlike the relatively organized Parker spiral of the interplanetary magnetic field inside the termination shock. The plasma temperature increases dramatically. The solar wind slows down by converting bulk kinetic energy to thermal energy, heating to temperatures of tens of millions of Kelvin. The density of energetic particles increases as particles are accelerated at the termination shock through a process called diffusive shock acceleration. For a spacecraft and crew transiting through the heliosheath, these conditions present specific challenges. The enhanced energetic particle flux at the termination shock, particles accelerated to energies of tens to hundreds of mega-electron volts, is significantly more intense than the typical interplanetary particle environment. During solar maximum, the termination shock can be a site of intense particle acceleration, producing elevated radiation doses that would be difficult to protect against. The turbulent magnetic field in the heliosheath also affects the propagation of both solar energetic particles and galactic cosmic rays through the region. The turbulence scatters particles, increasing the effective path length they travel and modifying the dose rate experienced by a spacecraft in the region. The specific particle environment in the heliosheath depends on the solar cycle phase, the specific location within the heliosheath, and the direction of travel, making it difficult to predict precisely from the limited data available from the Voyager spacecraft, which sampled only 2 specific directions. The heliopause itself, the actual boundary between heliospheric and interstellar plasma, is a thin region where the plasma changes abruptly from solar wind material to interstellar material. The crossing is associated with specific changes in the magnetic field and the particle environment that were measured by both Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. The hot mantle, the layer of elevated temperature plasma detected by Voyager 2 at the heliopause, represents an additional source of energetic particles that a crossing spacecraft would encounter. Any crewed mission to the heliopause and beyond would therefore need to transit through this entire sequence of environments: the heliosheath with its turbulent plasma and enhanced particle flux, the heliopause with its associated plasma and field changes, before reaching the interstellar space beyond. The transit would take years at any realistic speed, and during those years, the crew would be exposed to the enhanced particle environment of the boundary region, on top of the already significant GCR flux. Let us now talk about the communication and navigation hazards of deep space, because these are less physically dramatic than radiation, but in practical terms just as limiting for any crewed mission. Communication with a spacecraft leaving the solar system becomes progressively more challenging as distance increases. The power of a radio signal decreases as the square of the distance. At twice the distance, the signal is 4 times weaker. At the distance of the heliopause, approximately 100 to 120 astronomical units, the signal from a spacecraft is already approximately 10,000 times weaker than the same signal at Earth's distance. The signals from Voyager 1, currently at approximately 165 astronomical units, are received at power levels of approximately 10 to the negative 16 watts, requiring the largest antennas of the deep space network to detect. For a crewed mission, the communication requirements are more stringent than for robotic probes. A human crew needs voice and video communication, data rates many orders of magnitude higher than the 160 bits per second achievable with Voyager-class transmitters at Voyager distances. Achieving the data rates needed for meaningful crew communication at distances of tens to hundreds of astronomical units requires either much larger antennas, much more powerful transmitters, or both. Even if the bandwidth problem is solved, the latency problem cannot be. The one-way signal travel time at the speed of light from a spacecraft at 100 astronomical units is approximately 14 hours. A simple question from mission control to the crew takes 14 hours to arrive. The reply takes another 14 hours to return. A complete round-trip exchange takes 28 hours, more than a full day. Real-time communication is physically impossible beyond a few light seconds. At interstellar distances, light years from Earth, the communication delay becomes decades or centuries, making any meaningful ongoing exchange with Earth completely impossible. For a crewed interstellar mission, the crew would need to be essentially self-sufficient in every sense, not just physically, but intellectually and psychologically. Mission control could provide support in the form of stored information and occasionally updated knowledge bases, but could not provide real-time guidance or assistance in any situation requiring rapid response. The crew would be making all significant decisions entirely on their own. Navigation at interstellar distances presents different challenges from interplanetary navigation. Within the solar system, spacecraft are navigated using radio ranging, precise measurement of the round-trip travel time of radio signals to determine distance, and of the Doppler shift of the received signal to determine velocity. This technique has achieved extraordinary precision, determining the positions of the Voyager spacecraft to within a few kilometers after 47 years and tens of billions of kilometers of travel. At interstellar distances, the ranging technique breaks down because the round-trip travel time is measured in years rather than hours. The uncertainty in the timing measurements accumulates over such long intervals that position determination becomes extremely imprecise. Alternative navigation techniques, using the positions of pulsars as timing references, or using parallax measurements against background stars, have been proposed and would provide some position information, but with accuracies significantly worse than what is achievable within the solar system. For a mission that needs to arrive at a specific destination, a specific star system at a specific distance, navigation errors that might be acceptable for a robotic probe could be mission-ending for a crewed spacecraft. The fuel required for mid-course corrections is significant, and if the spacecraft has wandered significantly off its intended trajectory, the corrections required might exceed what the propulsion system can provide. Let us now talk about the thermal environment of deep space, about what happens to temperature in the outer solar system and beyond, and why this creates specific engineering challenges. Inside the solar system, temperature management for spacecraft involves balancing two competing factors. On the sunlit side of a spacecraft, solar radiation delivers heat. At Earth's distance, approximately 1,361 watts per square meter. On the shadowed side, no solar radiation arrives, but the spacecraft radiates heat into cold space. The result is a large temperature difference between illuminated and shadowed surfaces, potentially hundreds of degrees Celsius, that must be managed through careful thermal design. As distance from the Sun increases, the solar radiation intensity decreases as the square of the distance. At the distance of Jupiter, approximately 5.2 astronomical units, the solar intensity is approximately 50 watts per square meter. At Uranus, 19 astronomical units, approximately 3.7 watts per square meter. At the heliopause, approximately 100 astronomical units, approximately 0.14 watts per square meter. At these outer distances, solar heating is essentially negligible. Without solar heating, a spacecraft and everything in it would cool toward the background temperature of deep space, approximately 2.7 Kelvin, the temperature of the cosmic microwave background radiation. Electronic components, propulsion systems, and life support equipment all have minimum operating temperatures below which they cease to function correctly. Maintaining spacecraft systems at operating temperatures in the outer solar system and beyond requires artificial heating, which requires power. This is why the Voyager spacecraft use radioisotope thermoelectric generators, RTGs, rather than solar panels. At Voyager distances, solar panels would be useless. The solar intensity is too low to generate useful power. RTGs convert the heat from radioactive decay of plutonium-238 into electricity, and also provide waste heat that helps maintain spacecraft temperature. Without RTGs, or some equivalent power source, a spacecraft in the outer solar system would simply freeze. For a crewed spacecraft, the thermal management problem is more complex than for an uncrewed probe. A crew generates metabolic heat, approximately 80 to 100 watts per person at rest, which must be removed to prevent overheating. At the same time, the spacecraft structure needs to be maintained at temperatures compatible with life support system operation. In the outer solar system and interstellar space, the spacecraft would need to be heavily insulated against heat loss to the cold environment, while simultaneously having provisions for removing metabolic heat and equipment heat from the interior. The power required to maintain a crewed spacecraft at habitable temperatures in interstellar space without any solar input would be substantial. Nuclear power in the form of fission reactors or advanced RTGs appears to be the only viable option for the required power levels over the timescales of an interstellar mission. The development and qualification of space nuclear power systems with the required power output, lifetime, and reliability is a significant technical challenge. Let us now talk about the micrometeorite and dust hazard, about the specific risk from small particles that exists throughout the solar system and in the interstellar medium. The interplanetary medium contains dust and small particles at various concentrations, produced by the outgassing of comets, the collisions of asteroids, and the gradual erosion of all solid bodies in the solar system by collisions with smaller objects. At Earth's distance, this dust contributes to the zodiacal light, the faint glow visible before sunrise or after sunset along the ecliptic, and produces the meteors visible during meteor showers when Earth passes through the debris trail of a comet. At the speeds required for interstellar travel, even at relatively modest fractions of the speed of light, the impact energy of a dust particle is devastating. A 1 gram particle striking a spacecraft moving at 10% of the speed of light carries approximately 4.5 times 10 to the 11 joules of kinetic energy, comparable to the explosive yield of approximately 100 tons of TNT. A spacecraft hull capable of withstanding such an impact while still being light enough to be accelerated to the required speed represents an enormous engineering challenge. Even within the solar system, at the speeds required for the outer solar system and heliospheric boundary region, tens of kilometers per second, micrometeorite impacts represent a real hazard. The Voyager spacecraft were designed with some protection against small impacts, but were not intended for the sustained high-velocity travel that a crewed interstellar mission would require. A crewed spacecraft operating in the outer solar system for years would accumulate a significant probability of encountering a damaging impact. In the interstellar medium, the particle density is much lower than in the inner solar system. The average density is approximately 1 atom per cubic centimetre, compared to approximately 10 to the 6th atoms per cubic centimetre in interplanetary space at Earth's distance. But the particles that do exist in the interstellar medium, interstellar dust grains ranging from submicron to micron sizes, would still pose a hazard at interstellar travel speeds. The flux of interstellar grains has been measured by spacecraft and is not negligible. A spacecraft travelling through the interstellar medium at a significant fraction of the speed of light would encounter these grains as a continuous stream of high-velocity projectiles. The breakthrough starshot concept, which proposes sending gram-scale laser-sail spacecraft to Alpha Centauri at 20% of the speed of light, specifically identified interstellar dust as one of the primary technical challenges. At 20% of the speed of light, even a submicron grain of interstellar dust carries enough energy to punch through a thin sail or electronic component. The proposed solution involves making the spacecraft extremely small, gram scale, so that the probability of encountering a damaging particle during the journey is acceptably low. For a spacecraft massive enough to support a human crew, this option is not available. Let us now talk about the psychological hazard of extreme isolation, about what happens to human minds in conditions of isolation, monotony, and distance from Earth that exceed all previous experience. Human psychology evolved in conditions of continuous social engagement, sensory variety, and the presence of the natural environment, changing weather, seasonal cycles, contact with other species, the rhythms of day and night, and the cycles of human social life. The brain is not a passive recorder of experience, but an active prediction machine that requires novel input to function normally. It generates signals of interest, curiosity, or alarm when incoming sensory data deviates from its predictions, and when there is nothing novel to deviate from predictions, it finds other ways to generate stimulation. The specific psychological challenges of long-duration isolation in confined environments are well documented from analog situations: Antarctic winter-over stations, submarine patrols, long-duration spaceflight, isolated research stations. What consistently emerges from these studies is a progression of psychological effects that unfold over time in predictable patterns. In the first weeks and months of isolation, there is typically a honeymoon period. The novelty of the situation provides stimulation. The crew is engaged with learning their environment and establishing routines, and morale is generally high. This is followed by a period of middle phase challenges, increasing monotony, heightened interpersonal friction from forced proximity, and the psychological burden of knowing that the isolation will continue for a long time. Then, typically in the period spanning the 3/4 mark of the mission, the third quarter phenomenon appears. Mood deteriorates, motivation drops, interpersonal conflicts become more frequent and more difficult to resolve. For a mission lasting years or decades, these patterns would play out on unprecedented timescales. The third quarter phenomenon that appears at a predictable point in shorter missions would occur on a timescale of years in an interstellar mission, and the recovery from the third quarter trough and the return to high function near the end of the mission would similarly occur years later. The communication delay makes the psychological challenges significantly worse. On the ISS crew, members can video call family members and friends in real time. They can receive news from Earth with minimal delay. They participate in the ongoing social world of their home planet in a meaningful, if limited, way. On a mission leaving the solar system, the communication delay, growing from hours to days to eventually light years, makes real-time connection with Earth progressively less possible. At distances beyond a few light hours, real-time conversation is impossible. A message takes hours to arrive. The reply takes hours to return. The emotional texture of relationships across such distances changes fundamentally. Communication becomes an exchange of pre-recorded messages rather than a conversation, with hours of silence between each exchange. Family members age, friends move through life, the world changes, and the crew observes all of this through time-delayed dispatches that arrive as records of a past that has already become history by the time it is received. The specific crew composition, how many people, what their interpersonal dynamics are, how they are selected and trained, would be critical. Research on high-performance teams in extreme environments consistently shows that interpersonal compatibility and conflict resolution skills are among the most important predictors of mission success. On a mission with no possibility of evacuation or crew replacement, the consequences of interpersonal breakdown are potentially mission-ending. The question of mental health care on an interstellar mission is also deeply challenging. Current space medicine includes provisions for psychological support, access to mental health professionals via telecommunications, physical exercise programs, scheduled rest and recreation. But at interstellar distances, the communication delay makes real-time psychological consultation impossible. Any mental health crisis, depression, anxiety, psychosis, interpersonal violence, must be managed by the crew themselves, using whatever resources are available and without real-time professional support. The experience of extreme isolation also produces specific cognitive effects beyond the emotional and interpersonal challenges. Decision-making quality deteriorates under chronic stress and isolation. Risk assessment becomes less accurate. The ability to maintain perspective on small problems diminishes. Complex technical decisions, exactly the kind that might be required in an emergency, are made less well by people who are cognitively depleted by months or years of isolation. Let us talk about the physiological effects of long-duration microgravity, because any mission leaving the solar system would spend years in the near weightlessness of interplanetary crews, and the physiological consequences of this exposure accumulate in ways that become increasingly severe over the timescales required. In the absence of gravity, the human body undergoes systematic deterioration across multiple organ systems simultaneously. The effects are well documented from long-duration ISS missions. The longest continuous spaceflight ever completed was approximately 437 days by cosmonaut Valery Polyakov. And from the extensive physiological monitoring of ISS crew members over more than 2 decades of continuous occupation. Bone loss is the most studied and most quantified effect. Weight-bearing bones, the spine, the hips, the femur, lose mineral density at a rate of approximately 1 to 2% per month in microgravity. Over 6 months, this amounts to 6 to 12% bone density loss, a degree of deterioration that would take a decade or more to develop through normal aging on Earth. Over a year, already beyond the experience of most long-duration astronauts, the loss approaches values that in ground-based medicine would be classified as severe osteoporosis. Exercise is the primary countermeasure, and it is partially effective. The rigorous 2-hour-per-day exercise protocol on the ISS, combining resistance exercise on specialized equipment with aerobic exercise, reduces the rate of bone loss substantially, but does not eliminate it. After 6-month ISS missions, most astronauts return with measurable bone density reductions, despite the exercise protocol, and require months of rehabilitation before returning to pre-flight levels. For a mission lasting years, let alone decades, the bone loss question becomes one of permanent versus temporary impairment. Current evidence from ISS missions suggests that most bone density lost in 6 months can be recovered over months of post-flight rehabilitation. Whether bone density lost over years of spaceflight is similarly recoverable is not known, because no human has spent years continuously in microgravity. The relationship between duration of exposure and recoverability may not be linear. There may be a threshold beyond which bone loss becomes essentially irreversible. The problem is compounded by the specific character of the bone loss. In microgravity, the loss is not uniform. It is concentrated in the weight-bearing lower extremities and spine, the bones most important for standing and walking in gravity. A crew member who has spent 5 years in microgravity and then needs to walk on the surface of a destination world, or simply to function in any gravity environment after return to Earth, would be doing so with bones dramatically weakened in exactly the regions most critical for that function. Muscle atrophy parallels the bone loss. Without the constant load of supporting body weight against gravity, skeletal muscles, particularly the muscles of the lower extremities, progressively atrophy. The same exercise protocol that partially mitigates bone loss also partially mitigates muscle loss, but does not eliminate it. After years in microgravity, the lower body muscle mass of a crew member would be substantially reduced compared to pre-flight levels, producing weakness that could be disabling in any gravity environment. Cardiovascular deconditioning is another systematic effect. The heart adapts to the reduced workload of microgravity. Without the need to pump blood against the pull of gravity, it becomes smaller and less efficient. The adaptation happens relatively quickly. Measurable changes in cardiac structure are detectable within weeks of entering microgravity. Over years, the adaptation would be profound. The cardiovascular system of a crew member who has spent years in microgravity would be significantly less capable of supporting normal physical activity in a gravity environment than it was before the mission. Spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, SANS, is a more recently identified and deeply concerning physiological effect. Approximately 70% of astronauts on long-duration ISS missions develop some degree of visual impairment, flattening of the eyeball, swelling of the optic nerve, and retinal changes consistent with elevated intracranial pressure. The proposed mechanism involves the redistribution of fluid toward the head in microgravity. Without gravity's downward pull, fluid accumulates in the upper body and head, increasing intracranial pressure. Some of the structural changes associated with SANS appear to be permanent. Optic nerve swelling that does not fully resolve after return to gravity, retinal changes that persist. The visual impairment associated with SANS ranges from mild and subclinical to significant reductions in visual acuity. For a crew member on a years-long interstellar mission, the cumulative SANS damage could result in significant permanent visual impairment, a serious functional deficit for a crew that needs to operate complex systems and make fine visual observations. Immune function deterioration is a less visible but potentially critical effect. The immune system's response to microgravity includes altered immune cell populations, reduced immune cell function, and increased viral reactivation. Latent viruses that the immune system normally holds in check reactivate in the stress of spaceflight. On the ISS, the consequences of this immune suppression are limited. The environment is sterile, and crew members are screened for infectious disease before flight. On a multi-year interstellar mission with no possibility of medical evacuation, any infectious disease that develops would need to be managed entirely with on-board resources. The artificial gravity solution, rotating the spacecraft or a section of it to produce centripetal acceleration equivalent to some fraction of Earth gravity, is the most promising approach to mitigating the physiological effects of microgravity. The physics are straightforward. Rotation produces an effective gravity field that the body experiences similarly to real gravity. The biological effects of partial versus full gravity are not well characterized. It is not known whether 1/2 Earth gravity is sufficient to prevent bone and muscle loss, or whether full gravity is required. The engineering challenges of artificial gravity are substantial. Producing 1 g of artificial gravity at a rotation rate of 2 revolutions per minute, the threshold above which most people experience significant Coriolis-induced disorientation, requires a rotation radius of approximately 224 meters. This is a very large structure by current spacecraft standards. No spacecraft with artificial gravity has ever been built and flown. The engineering is not impossible, the physics are well understood, but it represents a significant departure from current spacecraft design practice and would add substantially to the mass and complexity of any interstellar mission. Let us now talk about the specific problem of medical care on an interstellar mission, because this is one of the most practically challenging aspects of extreme duration deep space travel, and one that does not have fully satisfactory solutions with current technology. On Earth, medical emergencies are handled by a specialized infrastructure: hospitals, specialist physicians, emergency services, diagnostic equipment, surgical facilities, pharmaceuticals. The infrastructure is large, expensive, and requires specialist training to use effectively. It cannot be replicated on a spacecraft. The medical care available on the ISS is limited, but partially compensated by the proximity to Earth. In a genuine emergency, a crew member can be returned to Earth within hours using the Soyuz escape vehicle. This rescue option has never been used, but its existence provides a safety net that profoundly affects how medical risk is managed on the station. For a mission leaving the solar system, there is no rescue option. Whatever medical emergency develops, whatever illness or injury or psychological crisis occurs, must be managed by the crew with whatever resources they have on board. The crew must be capable of providing medical care at a level sufficient to handle the full range of conditions that might arise over years or decades of isolated living. This requires training that approaches the level of a physician for all crew members, not just for a designated medical officer. On a crew of 4 or 6 people, the designated medical officer might be incapacitated through illness, injury, or psychological impairment at exactly the moment when their expertise is most needed. Every crew member needs sufficient medical knowledge and skill to manage emergencies without the designated expert. The pharmaceutical inventory for an interstellar mission is another challenge. Medications have shelf lives. The potency and safety of pharmaceutical compounds degrades over time. For a mission lasting decades, the medications carried at launch would need to either have extraordinary shelf lives or be synthesized on board as needed. The synthesis of complex pharmaceutical compounds from basic precursors in a spacecraft environment is technically demanding and requires specialized equipment and expertise. Surgical care, if required, presents particular challenges. Surgery in microgravity is significantly more difficult than surgery in a gravity field. Blood behaves differently. It does not pool. It forms droplets and globules that can obscure the surgical field and potentially enter the respiratory system of the surgeon. Surgical equipment must be redesigned for the microgravity environment. The surgeon must be trained to work in conditions fundamentally different from any terrestrial operating theatre. Dental care is a specific and underappreciated medical challenge. Dental problems, cavities, abscess, broken teeth, periodontal disease, are common over any sufficiently long time period. On Earth, dental care is routine and widely available. On an interstellar mission, the crew must be able to manage dental emergencies with limited equipment and training. An untreated dental abscess can become life-threatening through systemic infection, making dental care a potentially critical safety issue for a long-duration mission. The psychological dimension of medical care on an interstellar mission adds additional complexity. The knowledge that any serious medical problem must be managed with limited resources by people who are not specialists, and that there is no rescue if the management fails, creates a baseline of medical anxiety that affects crew psychology even in the absence of actual medical emergencies. The stress of chronic, low-level health concern over years or decades is itself a psychological burden that contributes to the overall challenge of maintaining crew function. Let us now talk about the propulsion problem specifically, about why the timescale of interstellar travel with current and near-future technology is so long that it transforms every other hazard from manageable to potentially unsurvivable. The fundamental equation of rocket propulsion, the Tsiolkovsky rocket equation, relates the achievable velocity change to the ratio of initial to final mass and the exhaust velocity. The equation is exponential. The propellant mass required to achieve a given velocity change increases exponentially as the desired velocity approaches the exhaust velocity. To achieve a velocity significantly higher than the exhaust velocity of the propellant, the spacecraft must carry enormous amounts of propellant. Chemical propulsion, burning hydrogen and oxygen to produce steam, achieves exhaust velocities of approximately 4.4 kilometers per second. To accelerate a spacecraft to 10% of the speed of light, 30,000 kilometers per second, using chemical propulsion would require a mass ratio of approximately e to the power of 30,000 over 4.4, approximately e to the 6,818, a number so astronomically large that the spacecraft would need to be essentially entirely propellant, with essentially no payload. Chemical propulsion cannot achieve interstellar travel speeds. Nuclear thermal propulsion, using a fission reactor to heat hydrogen propellant, achieves exhaust velocities of approximately 8 to 9 kilometers per second. Better than chemical propulsion by a factor of 2, but still hopelessly inadequate for reaching significant fractions of the speed of light. Nuclear pulse propulsion. The Orion concept, using a series of nuclear explosions, could potentially achieve exhaust velocities of tens of thousands of kilometers per second, making 1 to 10% of the speed of light conceivable. But nuclear pulse propulsion has never been tested in space and faces political obstacles from nuclear weapon test ban treaties. Fusion propulsion, if controlled fusion can be achieved, could potentially reach exhaust velocities of a significant fraction of the speed of light. The specific impulse achievable with fusion propulsion would make journeys to the nearest stars possible in decades rather than millennia. But controlled fusion has been 30 years away for 50 years, a standing joke in the physics community, and no fusion propulsion system has been demonstrated at any scale. Laser sail concepts. Using a powerful ground-based or space-based laser array to push a lightweight sail to high velocities have been seriously proposed and partially funded through the Breakthrough Starshot initiative. The concept is physically sound. Photons carry momentum and can push a sail, but the engineering is extraordinarily challenging. Producing a laser powerful enough to push a sail to 20% of the speed of light requires laser power output comparable to current global electricity generation. Maintaining the laser beam pointed at a sail growing smaller as it accelerates away from the solar system requires optical precision at extraordinary levels. And a sail large enough to be accelerated to such speeds by a practical laser must be extraordinarily thin, potentially a few nanometers, raising questions about structural integrity and resistance to interstellar particle impacts. Even if laser sail technology is developed for robotic probes, the Breakthrough Starshot vision, scaling it to a crewed spacecraft is a completely different challenge. A crewed spacecraft needs life support, radiation shielding, food and water, medical equipment, communication systems, scientific instruments, a mass of perhaps hundreds or thousands of tons, rather than the gram scale of a laser sail probe. The laser power required to accelerate a crewed spacecraft to significant fractions of the speed of light is not achievable with any foreseeable technology. More exotic propulsion concepts, antimatter drives, warp drives, wormholes, are sometimes discussed in the context of interstellar travel. Antimatter annihilation with matter produces energy with an efficiency approaching 100%, far more energetic than any nuclear reaction, and in principle could produce the exhaust velocities needed for relativistic travel. But antimatter is extraordinarily expensive to produce. Current production rates yield nanograms per year at costs of quadrillions of dollars per gram, and storing it stably against annihilation is a profound technical challenge. Warp drives and wormholes remain speculative. There is no established physics demonstrating their feasibility, and the energy requirements estimated for even theoretical warp drive concepts are cosmological in scale. The propulsion problem therefore places a floor on the minimum transit time for any interstellar mission, and that floor translates directly into a minimum accumulated radiation dose, a minimum accumulated physiological deterioration, and a minimum duration of psychological isolation. All of these minimum values, set by the physics of propulsion, are already at or beyond the limits of human survivability based on current understanding of human physiology and psychology in space. This does not mean interstellar human travel is forever impossible. It means that it requires breakthrough propulsion that achieves performance not yet demonstrated in any engineering system, and that without such breakthrough propulsion, the hazards of leaving the solar system are not merely severe, but are, in combination, likely fatal to any human crew attempting the journey on timescales of decades or centuries. Let us now talk about the specific question of life support over the timescales of an interstellar mission, about what it actually requires to keep human beings alive in a closed system for years or decades without resupply from Earth. The ISS Life Support System, the Environmental Control and Life Support System, is one of the most sophisticated engineering systems ever built. It maintains the cabin atmosphere at appropriate oxygen and nitrogen levels, removes carbon dioxide exhaled by the crew, recycles water from humidity condensate and urine, controls temperature and humidity, and manages various other aspects of the crew's physical environment. After more than 2 decades of operation, the ISS Life Support System has proven generally reliable, but it has not operated without failures, and resupply from Earth has been essential to its continued function. The ECLSS was designed for an ISS-scale mission with regular resupply. Consumables that cannot be regenerated are restocked by cargo spacecraft every few months. On an interstellar mission, there is no resupply. Whatever the spacecraft leaves Earth with, food, water, spare parts, consumables of all kinds, is all it will ever have. The life support system must function reliably for the entire duration of the mission, without resupply, and with only the repair capability of the crew. The water recycling efficiency of current life support systems approaches but does not reach 100%. The ISS water recovery system recovers approximately 90 to 95% of the water in urine and atmospheric condensate. The remaining 5 to 10% is lost and must be replaced by resupply water. On an interstellar mission, this loss rate, small as it is, would, over years or decades, accumulate to a significant fraction of the total water supply. A life support system for an interstellar mission needs to achieve water recovery efficiencies approaching 100%, losing essentially no water to the environment over decades of operation. Atmosphere composition management faces similar challenges. The ISS maintains its atmosphere by continuously consuming oxygen stored in pressurized tanks, replenished by cargo spacecraft, and venting carbon dioxide to space. On an interstellar mission, there are no replenishment launches, and venting atmosphere to space means losing resources that cannot be replaced. The atmosphere must be maintained in a fully closed loop. Oxygen produced from some source, carbon dioxide converted back to usable compounds, nitrogen maintained at appropriate partial pressure, all within the spacecraft without loss. One approach to long-duration life support is bioregenerative systems, using biological organisms to close the loops in the life support system. Plants produce oxygen through photosynthesis, fix carbon dioxide into organic compounds, and can produce food. Microorganisms can process waste streams and recycle nutrients. In principle, a sufficiently large and well-designed bioregenerative system could close all the material loops of a spacecraft's life support system, requiring only energy input, not material resupply. In practice, bioregenerative life support systems are significantly more complex and less reliable than conventional physicochemical systems. Plants can be affected by disease, by lighting failures, by the specific growing conditions of microgravity. A crop failure in a spacecraft's food production system could be catastrophic. The microbial ecology of a closed bioregenerative system in a spacecraft, the complex community of microorganisms living in the soil, the water, on surfaces, in the air, would evolve over years in ways that are difficult to predict and might produce conditions hostile to the crew or the plants they depend on. The development of reliable bioregenerative life support for interstellar missions would require decades of testing in increasingly realistic conditions, eventually including long-duration closed system tests that demonstrate the system's stability and reliability over the timescales of the mission it is intended for. No such testing has been done at the required scale or duration. Food is another critical life support challenge. Current ISS food is primarily pre-packaged, shelf-stable food with a shelf life of approximately 2 to 5 years. This is adequate for ISS missions of 6 to 12 months, but inadequate for interstellar missions of years or decades. Producing food on board through plant cultivation, algae cultivation, or cultured meat production would be necessary for any mission lasting more than a few years. The caloric and nutritional requirements of a small crew over years are substantial. A crew of 6 people requires approximately 15,000 to 18,000 calories per day collectively, and those calories must come with appropriate nutritional content, including not just macronutrients, but vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids that cannot be synthesized by the human body and must come from dietary sources. Plant-based food production in a spacecraft can provide many of these requirements, but the growing area required for a calorically complete diet for a small crew is significant, potentially thousands of square meters, which translates to mass and volume that must be launched from Earth. Let us now talk about one more specific hazard that is rarely discussed in popular treatments of interstellar travel: the danger from within. The danger that comes not from the external environment, but from the crew itself. Isolated, confined environments produce predictable patterns of interpersonal conflict. This is not a character flaw in the individuals involved. It is a human response to conditions for which human psychology did not evolve. In any small group confined in a small space for an extended period with no escape and no outside support, interpersonal tensions develop and escalate in ways that range from mildly disruptive to potentially mission-ending. The history of analog extreme environments provides specific examples. Antarctic expeditions have documented interpersonal conflicts, including violence. Submarine crews have documented psychological incidents affecting operational capability. The Mars 500 isolation experiment, a 520-day simulated Mars mission conducted in Moscow between 2010 and 2011, documented significant deterioration in crew activity levels and psychological function, despite the experiment being a simulation with none of the real dangers of actual spaceflight. For an interstellar mission, the interpersonal dynamics problem is compounded by several factors. The duration is longer than any analog. The real dangers are present: radiation, physiological deterioration, the knowledge that there is no return possible, adding stress beyond what simulation can replicate. The communication delay makes outside support unavailable. And the stakes are absolute. Any conflict that escalates to violence or to the psychological incapacitation of a key crew member cannot be managed by bringing in replacements or evacuating affected personnel. The selection and training of crew members for interpersonal compatibility and conflict resolution skills is the primary mitigation, but it can only reduce the probability of serious interpersonal incidents, not eliminate it. Pharmaceutical interventions, medications to manage anxiety, depression, or aggressive impulses, could supplement behavioral interventions, but raise their own concerns about long-term use and side effects. The design of the spacecraft itself could partially mitigate interpersonal conflict by providing adequate private space for crew members to be alone, to withdraw from the group when needed, without having to go outside the spacecraft. Current spacecraft design provides minimal privacy. The ISS has individual sleeping quarters, but the shared common areas are small and crew members are always near each other. A spacecraft designed for years of habitation would need to provide meaningfully more private space, which again translates to mass and volume. Let us now talk about what the outer solar system actually looks like, about the specific environment between the heliopause and the nearest stars, because understanding what is out there illuminates why the hazards are what they are. Beyond the heliopause, the interstellar medium begins. The interstellar medium in our local region, the local interstellar cloud embedded in the local bubble, has specific measurable properties. The temperature is approximately 6,000 Kelvin in the neutral component and 30,000 Kelvin in the ionized component. The density is approximately 0.3 atoms per cubic centimeter, significantly lower than the solar wind density even at large heliocentric distances. The magnetic field in the local interstellar medium is approximately 0.4 to 0.5 nanotesla, weak by terrestrial standards, but real and measurable. The galactic cosmic ray flux is higher than within the heliosphere by a factor of 2 to 3 for lower energy particles. The interstellar radiation field, ultraviolet and X-ray photons from nearby stars and more distant sources, provides a background of ionizing radiation that adds to the cosmic ray dose. The dust in the interstellar medium, micron-scale silicate and carbonaceous grains, is distributed at very low density, but represents a hazard for high-velocity travel. The interstellar dust flux has been measured by spacecraft including the Ulysses and Cassini missions, which detected interstellar grains entering the inner solar system. At the gram scale, the flux of interstellar grains is low, but for a large spacecraft traveling for years, the accumulated number of impacts is not negligible. The nearest stars represent specific destinations worth discussing. Proxima Centauri, the nearest at 4.24 light-years, is a red dwarf with a mass of approximately 12% of the Sun's mass. It is too faint to be seen with the naked eye from Earth. It has a known exoplanet, Proxima Centauri b, orbiting in the habitable zone at a distance of approximately 0.05 astronomical units. However, Proxima Centauri is a flare star. It produces intense ultraviolet and X-ray flares that are far more energetic relative to its quiescent output than the Sun's flares. These flares would likely make the surface of Proxima b hostile to life as we know it, and they would represent a significant radiation hazard for any spacecraft or crew in the system. Alpha Centauri A and B, at 4.37 light-years, are more Sun-like stars forming a binary system. Alpha Centauri A has a mass of approximately 1.1 solar masses, and Alpha Centauri b has approximately 0.9 solar masses. Both are more Sun-like in their output than Proxima Centauri, and less prone to extreme flares. The binary system orbits its common centre of mass with a period of approximately 80 years and a separation ranging from 11 to 36 astronomical units. The gravitational dynamics of the binary system complicate the stability of planetary orbits, particularly in the region where habitable planets would be expected. The journey to any of these systems, at realistic speeds, is measured in thousands of years with current propulsion. At the speeds achievable with the most optimistic near-term propulsion concepts, nuclear pulse propulsion for example, it might be reduced to centuries. Even at 10% of the speed of light, far beyond any current capability, the journey takes 42 years. During those 42 years, at 10% of the speed of light, using the most optimistic propulsion scenario, the crew would accumulate approximately 150,000 millisieverts of galactic cosmic ray dose. NASA's career limit for astronaut radiation exposure is 1,000 millisieverts. The dose at 10% of light speed over 42 years exceeds the career limit by a factor of 150. This is the fundamental arithmetic of leaving the solar system for human beings. The distances require time. The time requires surviving in deep space. Surviving in deep space requires solving radiation, propulsion, life support, microgravity, communication, navigation, and psychological isolation simultaneously and in combination, not sequentially, but all at once, over timescales for which no human has ever been tested. The dangers are not merely severe. In combination and over the required timescales, they are currently unsurvivable with any technology we have or can foresee in the near term. This is not pessimism, it is physics. And physics is what we need to solve before we can leave. Let us talk about what would actually need to be true. What technological developments would be required for leaving the solar system to become survivable for a human crew? The first and most fundamental requirement is propulsion that dramatically reduces transit time. Specifically, propulsion that achieves velocities high enough that the accumulated radiation dose during transit remains within the range that human biology can tolerate. If the transit time to the nearest star could be reduced to approximately 10 years, requiring approximately 40 to 50% of the speed of light, the accumulated galactic cosmic ray dose would be approximately 35,000 millisieverts. Still 35 times the current NASA career limit, but potentially manageable if the dose limit were revised upward based on better understanding of the biological effects and the development of effective countermeasures. Achieving 40 to 50% of the speed of light would require exhaust velocities of comparable magnitude, achievable in principle only with antimatter propulsion or some form of fusion propulsion with very high specific impulse. Neither of these is currently achievable at any scale. The development of antimatter propulsion would require solving the production, storage, and controlled release of antimatter in quantities many orders of magnitude beyond current capability. Fusion propulsion requires controlled fusion, still elusive after decades of research. The second requirement is radiation shielding, or countermeasures that go beyond passive shielding. Since passive shielding cannot effectively block galactic cosmic ray heavy ions, an alternative approach is biological. Developing treatments that either repair cosmic ray damage faster than it accumulates, or protect the body against the specific types of damage heavy ions cause. This is an active area of research. Pharmacological agents that upregulate DNA repair mechanisms, antioxidants that reduce oxidative stress from ionization, stem cell therapies that replace radiation-damaged cells. All of these have been proposed, and some have shown promise in preliminary studies. The specific challenge of preventing cognitive decline from heavy ion exposure is perhaps the most difficult biological problem to solve. Neurons cannot easily be replaced once damaged, and the brain's plasticity mechanisms may not be sufficient to compensate for the structural damage from years of heavy ion bombardment. Gene therapy approaches, introducing or upregulating genes that confer radiation resistance, represent one avenue being explored, but no such intervention has been demonstrated to be effective at the level required for interstellar mission protection. The third requirement is artificial gravity, demonstrated at the scale and reliability required for years of continuous operation. This requires building and flying rotating habitats of sufficient size to avoid disorienting Coriolis effects at moderate rotation rates. No such habitat has been built and flown. The engineering is understood in principle, but untested in practice. The mass and complexity penalty of a rotating habitat must be accommodated within the mass budget of a mission that is already extremely mass-constrained. The fourth requirement is fully closed-loop life support. Life support systems that achieve essentially 100% closure of all material loops without resupply for decades. This requires either extraordinary reliability in physicochemical systems, beyond anything currently achieved, or reliable bioregenerative systems that have been demonstrated in long-duration operation. Neither exists at the required level of performance and reliability. The fifth requirement is a fundamentally better understanding of human psychology in extreme isolation, better selection criteria for crew members that identify who will maintain high function over the required duration, better countermeasures for the inevitable psychological deterioration that accumulates over years of isolation, and better understanding of how crew interpersonal dynamics evolve over the required timescales. This understanding can only come from experience, from flying long-duration missions that accumulate the relevant data, which creates a chicken and egg problem, since the most relevant experience can only be gained on the missions for which the understanding is needed. These 5 requirements are not independent. They interact, and their solutions constrain each other. Faster propulsion reduces the radiation dose, but may increase the structural loads on the spacecraft. Artificial gravity adds mass that requires more propulsion energy. Better radiation shielding adds mass. Each solution to one problem makes other problems harder. The integrated solution, a spacecraft and mission design that simultaneously addresses all 5 requirements at the level needed, does not exist and will not exist through small incremental improvements to current technology. Leaving the solar system is not simply harder than going to Mars. It is a qualitatively different category of challenge, one that requires capabilities not merely better than what we have today, but different in kind from anything we have demonstrated. The gap between the current state of the art and what is required is measured not in engineering improvements, but in fundamental scientific breakthroughs. This is the honest answer to the question of how dangerous leaving the solar system is. Not just dangerous in the way that deep-sea diving or high-altitude mountaineering is dangerous, activities that require careful preparation and can kill the unprepared. Dangerous in the sense that the accumulated effects of radiation, physiological deterioration, psychological isolation, and life support limitations over the required timescales are, in combination, currently insurmountable by any technology we possess or can envision with near-term developments. The solution is not better engineering, it is better physics. It requires breakthroughs in propulsion, in radiation biology, in life support, that cannot be scheduled or predicted, but without which the dangers of leaving the solar system will remain beyond human tolerance. Understanding this is not discouraging, it is clarifying. The question is not whether we should try to leave the solar system. The scientific and exploratory case for eventually doing so is overwhelming. The question is what we need to understand and build before we can do so without killing everyone we send. And the answer to that question is quite a lot more than we currently have. Let us talk about what the specific numbers look like for the radiation hazard in more precise detail, because the abstract statement that galactic cosmic rays are dangerous does not convey the specific magnitude of the problem as well as the concrete arithmetic does. NASA's current career radiation exposure limit for astronauts is set at a level corresponding to a 3% increase in the probability of fatal cancer above the baseline risk. For a 35-year-old male astronaut, this corresponds to approximately 1,000 millisieverts. For a 35-year-old female astronaut, the limit is lower, approximately 600 millisieverts, because women have higher baseline radiation sensitivity for certain cancer types, particularly breast and ovarian cancer. The galactic cosmic ray dose rate in interplanetary space, measured by the radiation assessment detector aboard the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity rover during its cruise to Mars, is approximately 1.84 millisieverts per day. This is the dose rate in the inner solar system, partially modulated by the heliosphere, at a specific point in the solar cycle. Over a 180-day transit to Mars, the accumulated dose is approximately 300 millisieverts, already 30 to 50% of the career limit for a single mission. Outside the heliopause, the galactic cosmic ray flux is 2 to 3 times higher, approximately 4 to 6 millisieverts per day. Over 1 year in interstellar space, the accumulated dose would be approximately 1,500 to 2,200 millisieverts, well beyond the career limit. But these numbers do not capture the full biological hazard because the sievert dose metric does not adequately account for the biological effectiveness of heavy ions. The Bayer 7 Committee, the National Academy of Sciences committee that produced the authoritative assessment of radiation risk from low LET radiation, explicitly noted that its models should not be applied to the high LET heavy ion component of galactic cosmic rays, because the biological mechanisms are different. The quality factors used to convert absorbed dose to effective dose in sieverts, factors of 1 for photons and electrons, up to 20 for alpha particles and neutrons, were developed based on terrestrial radiation exposures and may significantly underestimate the biological effectiveness of the specific heavy ion species found in galactic cosmic rays. Research with accelerator-produced heavy ion beams, using facilities that can accelerate iron, silicon, and other nuclei to the energies characteristic of galactic cosmic rays, has consistently found biological effects that are more severe than the standard quality factors would predict. DNA damage from heavy ions is clustered, multiple strand breaks in close proximity, rather than isolated as from low LET radiation. This clustered damage is more difficult for cellular repair mechanisms to fix correctly and produces more mutations per unit dose. The central nervous system effects of heavy ion exposure are particularly concerning. Experiments with rodents exposed to simulated galactic cosmic ray environments have shown cognitive deficits at relatively low doses achievable within months of interstellar travel. A 2018 study published in the journal Scientific Reports exposed mice to a simulated galactic cosmic ray environment and found significant impairments in cognition and increases in anxiety-like behavior at doses corresponding to approximately 6 months of interstellar travel. The underlying pathology involved damage to dendritic branching, the physical structure of neural connections, and neuroinflammation that persisted after the exposure ended. Extrapolating from mouse results to human outcomes involves significant uncertainty. Mice and humans differ in their radiation sensitivity and in the specific organization of their neural circuits. But the direction of the effect is clear, and the dose at which it appears in mice is low enough to be concerning for any interstellar mission. The specific brain regions most affected in the rodent studies include the hippocampus, critical for learning and memory formation, and the prefrontal cortex, critical for decision-making, risk assessment, and behavioral regulation. These are precisely the functions that a crew member on an interstellar mission most needs to maintain. Radiation-induced cognitive decline affecting these regions would impair exactly the capabilities required to manage a complex spacecraft, respond to emergencies, and maintain interpersonal relationships under stress. There is also evidence from studies of childhood cancer survivors who received whole-brain radiation therapy as part of their treatment that radiation damage to the central nervous system can be permanent and progressive, continuing to manifest years after the exposure ends. While the radiation types and doses used in cancer therapy are different from the galactic cosmic ray exposure of deep space travel, the demonstration that radiation-induced cognitive decline can be permanent and delayed in its full manifestation is directly relevant to the risk assessment for interstellar missions. The NASA Human Research Program has identified galactic cosmic ray-induced cognitive impairment as one of the highest priority risks for future deep space missions. The specific research challenge is that there is no simple way to test countermeasures in human subjects. You cannot deliberately expose humans to high-energy heavy ion beams to test the effectiveness of protective measures. The research relies on animal models, in vitro cell studies, and computational modeling, all of which have limitations in predicting human outcomes. Let us now talk about one specific aspect of the radiation problem that is rarely discussed: the risk of acute radiation syndrome from solar energetic particle events at large heliocentric distances. Solar energetic particle events, the intense bursts of radiation associated with solar flares and coronal mass ejections, are the most immediately dangerous radiation source in the inner solar system. A large SEP event can deliver a lethal dose to an unprotected human in hours. The particles responsible are primarily protons, with energies ranging from tens to hundreds of megaelectron volts, energetic enough to penetrate light shielding, but not so energetic that thick shielding makes things worse. As a spacecraft moves to larger heliocentric distances, the intensity of SEP events decreases. The particles spread out over a larger volume as the solar wind carries them outward. At the distance of Jupiter, 5.2 astronomical units, SEP events are less intense than at Earth by approximately a factor of 25 to 50. At Saturn's distance, 9.5 astronomical units, the attenuation is greater still. By the time a spacecraft reaches the termination shock, approximately 80 to 100 astronomical units, SEP events from ordinary solar activity are likely too attenuated to represent an acute hazard. However, the termination shock itself accelerates particles, including particles from SEP events that reach the termination shock with sufficient energy to be further accelerated. The termination shock is a site of diffusive shock acceleration, where particles bounce back and forth across the shock boundary, gaining energy with each crossing. A large SEP event that seeds particles into the termination shock acceleration process could produce locally elevated energetic particle fluxes that exceed what the attenuated solar event alone would produce. The specific particle environment at the termination shock and in the heliosheath is poorly characterized because Voyager 1 and 2 are the only spacecraft that have made in situ measurements there. The limited data from the Voyager crossings shows elevated energetic particle intensities in the boundary region. For a crewed mission transiting through this region, the particle environment represents an additional radiation hazard on top of the chronic galactic cosmic ray background. Beyond the heliopause, the solar energetic particle hazard is essentially absent. The particles from solar events cannot penetrate the heliopause in significant numbers. The dominant radiation source in interstellar space is galactic cosmic rays, continuous, isotropic, impossible to fully shield against. Let us now talk about what specific propulsion concepts are being seriously considered for reaching the outer solar system and the heliopause on human-relevant timescales. Not interstellar travel, but the more modest goal of reaching the boundary of the solar system within a human career. The interstellar probe concept, studied by the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, proposes a robotic mission to reach 1,000 astronomical units within 50 years of launch, requiring a cruise speed of approximately 20 astronomical units per year, or approximately 95 kilometers per second. This is approximately 5 to 6 times faster than the Voyager spacecraft, and would be achieved through a combination of a powerful launch vehicle, potentially the Space Launch System or its commercial equivalent, and a large Jupiter gravity assist, followed by a close solar pass using a solar thermal or solar sail propulsion boost near perihelion. The solar thermal propulsion concept, sometimes called the Obert maneuver in this context, involves flying the spacecraft very close to the Sun, within the orbit of Mercury, and firing a rocket engine at the point of closest approach. At this point, the spacecraft is moving at its maximum velocity, and the rocket exhaust velocity adds to a much larger base velocity, producing a final velocity significantly higher than what the same fuel could produce at larger distances. The efficiency of the maneuver depends on how close to the Sun the spacecraft can fly. Closer passes produce more efficient burns, but require a heat shield capable of surviving solar proximity. For a crewed spacecraft, the solar thermal maneuver is not directly applicable. Flying human beings within the orbit of Mercury is extremely hazardous due to the intense solar radiation and heat. But the concept illustrates an approach to achieving higher velocities without breakthrough propulsion technology, using the solar gravitational well as an energy reservoir that the spacecraft can exploit. Nuclear electric propulsion using a fission reactor to generate electricity which then powers an ion thruster, offers higher specific impulse than chemical propulsion, but relatively low thrust. Ion thrusters exhaust propellant at extremely high velocities, tens to hundreds of kilometers per second, compared to chemical propulsion's few kilometers per second. But the thrust force they produce is small, millinewtons rather than kilonewtons, so they must operate for months or years to build up significant velocity. For a spacecraft that has time, a robotic probe on a decade-long cruise, nuclear electric propulsion is promising. For a crewed spacecraft that needs high thrust to shorten transit times, nuclear electric propulsion's low thrust is a limitation. Nuclear thermal propulsion, heating hydrogen propellant with a fission reactor to achieve exhaust velocities of 8 to 9 kilometers per second, has been demonstrated in ground tests in the 1960s and 1970s under the NERVA program, and represents a more mature technology than most advanced propulsion concepts. The demonstrated exhaust velocities are approximately twice those of chemical propulsion, significantly reducing propellant mass requirements for a given velocity change. For missions within the solar system, nuclear thermal propulsion offers meaningful improvements over chemical propulsion. But even nuclear thermal propulsion does not solve the timescale problem for interstellar travel. At the exhaust velocities achievable with nuclear thermal propulsion, 8 to 9 kilometers per second, and with practically achievable mass ratios, spacecraft velocities of perhaps 30 to 50 kilometers per second above escape velocity from the Sun might be achievable. This would reduce the transit time to the heliopause from Voyager's 40 years to perhaps 15 to 20 years, a significant improvement, but still a timescale that pushes against human physiological and psychological limits. The laser sail concept for human missions requires a fundamentally different approach from the grand-scale breakthrough starshot probes. To push a crewed spacecraft massive enough to include life support, radiation shielding, and everything else needed for a crew requires either an extraordinarily powerful laser or a very efficient sail with a very favourable mass-to-area ratio. The power required to push a 1,000-ton crewed spacecraft to 10% of the speed of light over a reasonable acceleration period is approximately 10 to the 18th watts, a billion gigawatts. This is approximately 5,000 times the current global electricity generating capacity. The energy infrastructure required does not exist, and there is no near-term path to building it. Magnetic sails, using a large superconducting loop to create a magnetic field that interacts with the solar wind, have been proposed as a complement to laser sails. The solar wind exerts a pressure on the magnetic field of the sail, which can be used for both acceleration and deceleration, the same principle that makes it interesting for both departing from and arriving at a destination. But the thrust produced by a magnetic sail interacting with the solar wind is small and decreases rapidly with distance as the solar wind density falls. Magnetic sails are not a path to interstellar speeds. Let us now talk about the specific problem of deceleration, because this is a challenge that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of interstellar propulsion, and that makes the problem approximately twice as hard as it might first appear. To reach Alpha Centauri in a reasonable time requires accelerating to a high velocity. To arrive there, rather than simply passing through at high speed, requires decelerating to orbital or landing speeds. Deceleration requires the same energy as acceleration. In a conventional rocket, it requires carrying additional propellant for the deceleration burn. For a laser sail, the deceleration problem is particularly acute. The laser that accelerates the sail from the solar system cannot follow it to Alpha Centauri. It is a solar system infrastructure element that operates over the first portion of the journey while the sail is still close enough to be illuminated. Once the sail is far enough from the solar system, the laser can no longer push it effectively. By the time the sail reaches Alpha Centauri, there is no laser waiting there to slow it down. Various deceleration schemes have been proposed. One involves splitting the sail, using a portion of the sail to reflect the laser beam back and push against the mainsail as a brake. This requires precise optical engineering to maintain the geometry of the reflecting and reflecting sails while both are moving at significant fractions of the speed of light. Another proposal involves the mag sail concept, using a magnetic sail to brake against the interstellar medium or against the wind of the destination star. The interstellar medium provides some braking. The magnetic field of the sail interacts with the interstellar plasma to produce a drag force. But at the fractions of the speed of light required for interstellar travel in reasonable time, the interstellar medium braking force is insufficient to decelerate to orbital speeds within the destination system. The destination star's wind could provide more braking, if the spacecraft can angle its magnetic sail to interact with the stellar wind of Alpha Centauri A or B. This requires approaching the destination star system at high speed and relying on the stellar wind to slow the spacecraft before it exits the system on the other side. The specific trajectory required is complex and requires precise navigation at speeds where navigation errors have large consequences. For a crewed mission, the deceleration problem is not merely a technical challenge, but a safety-critical constraint. The crew must arrive at the destination at speeds compatible with orbital insertion and eventual planetary landing, if landing is the goal, and they must accomplish this deceleration in a controlled way. The failure mode of a deceleration system, arriving at the destination at interstellar cruise speed with no way to slow down, is the equivalent of flying past the destination without any ability to stop. The total propulsion system for an interstellar mission, therefore, needs to provide velocity change for departure acceleration, mid-course corrections, destination deceleration, operations within the destination system, and return acceleration, if a return is planned. Summing these requirements, the total delta-V budget for a round-trip interstellar mission is approximately twice the one-way transit delta-V plus the in-system operations delta-V. This is a profoundly larger propulsion requirement than a one-way mission and makes the already difficult problem significantly harder. Let us now talk about something rarely considered in the hazard assessment of leaving the solar system: the danger from a future where the crew is committed to the mission before the mission reveals its full challenges. Any crewed mission to leave the solar system commits the crew at the moment of departure. There is no turning back. Not because turning back is technically impossible, but because the time and energy required to reverse course would leave the crew in an even worse position than continuing. A mission that has accelerated for months to achieve interstellar cruise speed cannot simply reverse its engines and return to Earth in any practical sense. By the time the mission has crossed into the outer solar system, the crew is committed to the transit, to the destination, and to whatever the destination offers when they arrive. This commitment under uncertainty is one of the most psychologically challenging aspects of interstellar travel. The crew must leave with incomplete knowledge of what they will encounter. The environment at the destination, the specific radiation environment of the destination star system, the specific hazards of any destination planet or moon, the specific conditions for landing and survival, cannot be known in advance with the precision that would allow confident mission planning. Robotic precursor missions can characterize the destination, but they must arrive years or decades before the crewed mission, and their data must be transmitted back years or decades before the crew departs. By the time the crew arrives, the precursor data may be decades old, and the conditions may have changed. The specific hazard of committing to the mission before its full challenges are revealed applies to more than just the destination environment. The health effects of the mission itself, the radiation-induced cognitive decline, the physiological deterioration from years in microgravity, the psychological impacts of prolonged isolation, unfold gradually over the mission duration. A crew member who departs in excellent health may be significantly impaired by the time they reach the halfway point of the mission. The impairment may be progressive and irreversible, not something that can be recovered from by reducing activity or seeking rest. This creates a specific type of danger that has no analogue in shorter missions. It is the danger of the mission becoming unsalvageable before it is complete, of the crew being so impaired by mid-mission that they can no longer competently operate the spacecraft or make good decisions, yet being physically committed to continuing because there is no practical alternative. Detecting the onset of this kind of impairment in oneself is notoriously difficult. Cognitive decline is often more visible to observers than to the person experiencing it. A crew member whose decision-making is impaired by radiation-induced cognitive damage, or by accumulated sleep deprivation, or by the psychological effects of years of isolation, may not be aware of their own impairment. The crew as a whole, all subject to the same environmental stresses, may collectively fail to recognize declining cognitive function in their members. The monitoring and management of crew cognitive function is therefore a critical safety system for any interstellar mission, equivalent in importance to life support monitoring or navigation. Regular cognitive assessment using standardized tests, comparison against baseline performance established before departure, and the development of protocols for managing detected cognitive decline are all essential elements of a safe interstellar mission design. How to manage a situation where a key crew member's cognitive function has declined below the threshold required for their role, when there is no replacement, no rescue, and no option to abandon the mission, is a question that does not have a satisfactory answer with current protocols. Let us now talk about what the long-term future of human interstellar travel actually looks like given these hazards, about what the realistic pathway to eventually achieving it might be. The pathway is not a single breakthrough. No single invention, no matter how radical, solves all the problems simultaneously. Propulsion that achieves high fractions of the speed of light is necessary but not sufficient. It must be accompanied by radiation biology solutions, life support breakthroughs, artificial gravity systems, and a much deeper understanding of long-duration human psychology. The hazards of leaving the solar system are so interconnected that solving one without solving the others does not make the mission survivable. The most realistic pathway involves a staged progression of increasingly ambitious missions that build the required knowledge and technology incrementally. Short-duration missions to the outer solar system, to Uranus, Neptune, the Kuiper Belt, provide experience with the outer heliosphere environment and with the communication delays and operational autonomy required at large distances. Missions to the heliopause, like the proposed Interstellar Probe robotic mission, characterize the interstellar environment, and test technologies for surviving it. Eventually, crewed missions to the outer solar system, perhaps to the Kuiper Belt or to a destination within the Oort cloud, would accumulate the direct human experience needed. The development of artificial gravity systems, rotating habitats of sufficient size, is one of the most tractable near-term challenges, and one that could be addressed within the next few decades if there is sufficient investment. A rotating habitat demonstrator mission, a crewed spacecraft operating in low Earth orbit with artificial gravity, would provide the first human experience with the physiological effects of different gravity levels, and would test the engineering of rotating spacecraft systems. The radiation biology research needed to understand and mitigate the effects of galactic cosmic ray heavy ions is less tractable. It requires years of experimentation in facilities that can accelerate heavy ions to the required energies, and decades of observation to characterize chronic effects. The NASA Space Radiation Laboratory at Brookhaven National Laboratory is one of the primary facilities for this research. Progress is being made, but the fundamental biology of radiation-induced cognitive decline is still incompletely understood. The propulsion development timeline is the most uncertain. Fusion propulsion, if controlled fusion is achieved, would change the picture dramatically. The ITER project in France is attempting to demonstrate fusion energy production at net positive energy output. If successful, it would lay the groundwork for fusion-based propulsion development. But ITER's demonstration, if successful, establishes fusion as a viable energy source. Converting fusion power to a practical spacecraft propulsion system capable of reaching significant fractions of the speed of light requires additional decades of development. In the very long term, over centuries rather than decades, the hazards of leaving the solar system may be mitigated not by solving them for biological human beings, but by changing what is sent. Artificial intelligence systems capable of conducting exploration, scientific investigation, and eventually construction at interstellar destinations could be sent ahead of any crewed mission. Cryogenic hibernation, if achieved, could allow biological crew members to transit in a state of suspended metabolism, in which they accumulate neither radiation dose nor physiological deterioration. Genetic engineering and stem cell therapies could produce humans significantly more resistant to radiation than current biology allows. These longer-term possibilities are speculative. They require scientific and technological developments that cannot be scheduled or predicted. But they illustrate that the hazards of leaving the solar system, while severe with current biology and technology, are not necessarily permanent barriers to human expansion into interstellar space. What is clear is that the path between here and there is longer and harder than most popular accounts suggest. The interstellar medium is not simply empty space waiting to be traversed. It is an environment with specific physical properties that are hostile to unprotected human biology over the timescales required. Understanding these hazards clearly, in their specific physical detail, is the first step toward eventually overcoming them. Let us now talk about what the specific experience of the outer solar system environment would be for a human crew, about what they would actually encounter if they somehow survived to reach the boundary of the heliosphere. At 50 astronomical units from the Sun, somewhere in the outer Kuiper Belt region, the solar disk is visually reduced to a bright star. The Sun is still the brightest object in the sky, approximately magnitude -17 as seen from this distance, compared to -27 as seen from Earth, but it provides insufficient illumination to read by without augmentation. The temperature of any surface in direct sunlight would be approximately 50 Kelvin, -223 degrees Celsius. The cosmic microwave background fills the sky at 2.7 Kelvin from every direction. The zodiacal dust that fills the inner solar system and produces the zodiacal light is negligible at this distance. The sky would be extraordinarily dark, significantly darker than any sky visible from Earth, even at the most remote locations. The Milky Way would blaze with extraordinary clarity. Billions of stars, unobscured by the atmospheric scattering or light pollution that reduces its apparent brightness from any Earth-based perspective. Individual nebulae and star clusters would be visible to the naked eye in numbers and clarity exceeding any Earth observation. Earth would be invisible to the naked eye, too small and too close to the Sun to be distinguished from the Sun's glare without a telescope. The familiar constellations would look essentially identical to their appearance from Earth. The parallax shift from 50 astronomical units is too small to detectably rearrange the star's apparent positions. But the Sun, a brilliant star rather than an overwhelming sky-filling disk, would be in Sagittarius as seen from the outer solar system, marking the direction from which the crew had departed. At the termination shock, approximately 80 to 100 astronomical units, the environment changes in detectable ways. The particle environment becomes more intense. The magnetic field changes character. The solar wind slows and heats. A sensitive instrument would detect the transition, but a human observer without instruments would notice nothing visual. The sky would look identical on both sides of the termination shock. The heliopause, at approximately 120 astronomical units, is similarly invisible to the naked eye. The transition from heliospheric to interstellar plasma happens on scales small compared to astronomical distances and produces no visible phenomenon. The crew would know they had crossed into interstellar space only because their instruments told them so, because the particle detectors showed the transition in cosmic ray flux, and the plasma wave instrument showed the change in plasma density. Beyond the heliopause, in interstellar space, the environment is physically different from what the crew had experienced within the heliosphere. The background radiation increases. The interstellar magnetic field, weaker than the heliospheric field but organized differently, is measurable. The interstellar dust grains, absent from most of the heliosphere which deflects them, begin to arrive at the spacecraft's hull. And the Sun, now just one bright star among hundreds of thousands, is behind them. Not below the horizon, not obscured by atmosphere, just small, just one of many. The most important object in the solar system, the object that produces all the energy that drives all the life on Earth, is just a star. This is what leaving the solar system would actually look like from the inside. Not a dramatic boundary crossing, not a visible frontier, just a gradual transition from one physical environment to another, detectable by instruments but invisible to the naked eye, marked not by any perceptible change in the view, but only by the data flowing from the instruments and the knowledge of how far you have come. And the hazards, the galactic cosmic rays streaming through the hull, the interstellar dust grains arriving with increasing frequency, the clock of physiological deterioration continuing to tick. These hazards are equally invisible. They do not announce themselves. They accumulate silently in the tissue of the crew members who may not know the extent of the damage being done until its effects manifest in diminished cognitive function or elevated cancer risk or degraded bone structure that will impair their ability to function when they finally arrive, if they do, at wherever they are going. This is the honest picture of leaving the solar system. Beautiful, extraordinary, scientifically invaluable beyond measure, and significantly more dangerous than almost any popular account conveys. There is a specific moment that clarifies what leaving the solar system actually means. Not the moment of launch, not the moment of crossing the heliopause, but a quieter moment, perhaps years into a hypothetical mission somewhere in the outer solar system, when the crew member at the observation window looks back toward where Earth would be and sees nothing. Not Earth obscured by clouds or darkness, not Earth at the wrong angle, just nothing. A star-filled sky in which Earth is invisible without a telescope because it is too small and too close to the Sun to distinguish with the naked eye. At that moment, the physical reality of what leaving the solar system means becomes concrete in a way that all the numbers and distances and timescales cannot fully convey. The home world, the only inhabited world in the known universe, the place where every human being who has ever lived was born and most likely will die, is a point of light, indistinguishable from thousands of other points of light. And the hazards that brought the mission to that moment are not visible either. The galactic cosmic rays are invisible. They stream through the hull, through the bodies of the crew, through the neurons of the brain that is doing the looking, without announcement, without sensation, depositing energy in dense ionization tracks through biological tissue, in ways that will only become apparent later, if there is a later, in the form of cancers that may develop, or cognitive changes that may manifest, or cardiovascular damage that may ultimately be lethal. The interstellar medium is not empty and benign. It is not waiting to be crossed without consequence. It is an environment with specific physical properties that are hostile to human biology over the timescales that leaving the solar system requires. The radiation is real. The physiological deterioration from microgravity is real. The psychological isolation is real. The life support limitations are real. The propulsion inadequacy, the fundamental insufficiency of any technology we currently possess or can foresee in the near term to cover the required distances in survivable time, is real. These dangers are not equally severe. Some are more tractable than others. Artificial gravity can, in principle, mitigate the microgravity hazard. The physics are understood. The engineering is challenging, but not impossible, and sufficient investment could produce demonstrably functional rotating habitats within decades. Life support closure can, in principle, be improved toward the near 100% closure required for a decades-long mission. The biology and chemistry are understood. The engineering challenges are real, but in principle solvable. The radiation hazard is more fundamental. Galactic cosmic ray heavy ions cannot be effectively stopped by passive shielding. Adding more shielding can make things worse by generating secondary particle showers. The only effective mitigation is speed, getting from origin to destination fast enough that the accumulated dose remains tolerable. And speed requires propulsion that does not currently exist and cannot be improvised from engineering improvements to existing technology. This is the central fact about leaving the solar system that most treatments avoid stating clearly. The danger is not merely severe, the kind of severe that careful preparation and good engineering can overcome. It is in the current technological situation potentially unsurvivable over the timescales required by the distances involved. Not certainly unsurvivable. The uncertainty in the biological effects of long-duration heavy ion exposure is real, and the true threshold for lethality is not known. But the accumulated dose for a mission lasting decades in interstellar space would exceed current safe limits by factors of tens to hundreds, and the specific biological damage to the central nervous system from heavy ions may produce impairments that compromise the crew's ability to complete the mission before it kills them. The honest answer to how dangerous leaving the solar system is for a human crew with any foreseeable technology is more dangerous than we can currently survive in combination and over the required duration. This is not a reason to abandon the goal. It is a reason to understand the specific gaps between what is required and what is currently possible, and to direct research and development toward filling those gaps intelligently. The gap in propulsion, the need for exhaust velocities and specific impulses orders of magnitude beyond chemical propulsion, requires either nuclear fusion propulsion or something equally revolutionary. The gap in radiation biology, the need to either shield against or biologically compensate for decades of galactic cosmic ray heavy ion exposure, requires a level of understanding of radiation-induced cognitive damage that is only beginning to emerge from current research. The gap in life support, fully closed loops, no resupply, decades of reliable operation, requires bioregenerative or physicochemical systems at a level of performance not yet achieved in any test environment. Each of these gaps is real. Each has a research path that, with sufficient investment and focus, could lead toward solutions. None of the solutions can be improvised quickly or cheaply. All of them require sustained commitment over decades, the kind of sustained commitment that has historically been difficult to maintain in the face of competing priorities. But the goal itself, leaving the solar system, extending human presence to other star systems, eventually becoming a genuinely interstellar species, is not small. It is possibly the largest goal that our civilization could set for itself over the coming centuries. And understanding the specific hazards that must be overcome is the necessary first step toward overcoming them. The Voyager spacecraft showed that the boundary of the solar system could be crossed, that the heliopause is real and measurable and transitable. They showed that the interstellar medium has specific measurable properties. They showed that human engineering can produce objects that survive in the outer solar system and beyond for decades. These are not small demonstrations. They are the first data points on a curve that eventually extends to crewed interstellar travel. But the curve between unmanned robotic probes surviving for decades in interstellar space and human beings surviving interstellar transit is not a smooth extension of the same line. It is a step change, a qualitative difference that requires solving problems of a different category from those the Voyagers demonstrated could be solved. Right now, Voyager 2 is travelling through the interstellar medium at 15.4 kilometers per second. Its instruments are making measurements that no other instrument can make. The galactic cosmic ray flux it is measuring, the flux that would be streaming through any human crew attempting the same journey, is approximately 4 to 6 millisieverts per day. Every day, continuously, from every direction, simultaneously. That number, 4 to 6 millisieverts per day, is what leaving the solar system actually means for a human body. It is the physics of the thing, stripped of all romance and poetry. It is the reason why leaving the solar system is more dangerous than most people think. Not because the dangers are secret or hidden, but because the honest arithmetic of radiation dose and mission duration and biological tolerance has not been widely communicated. The stars are reachable. The interstellar medium can be traversed. The hazards are real and specific, and in the current technological situation, likely unsurvivable over the timescales required. And that gap between what is required and what is currently possible is the most interesting scientific and engineering problem that our civilization faces in the domain of space exploration. Not because it is the most pressing problem we face, not because it is the most immediately relevant to human welfare, but because solving it would change what we are, from a species confined to one solar system to something else entirely. The solar system is enormous. Its boundary is tens of billions of kilometers away. We have barely begun to explore it. The interstellar medium beyond it is vast beyond any human-scaled comprehension, and leaving it, for human beings, not just machines, is harder than almost anyone will tell you. That is the honest truth about what lies beyond the heliopause. Not impossibility, not ease, but a specific set of hard problems that require specific scientific solutions before the journey can be made by anyone other than the brilliant, patient, dying machines we have already sent. Voyager 2 is out there right now, measuring the hazard, surviving it, because it is not alive, because it does not need to survive in the way that a human crew would need to survive, because its instruments can tolerate what human tissue cannot. The day when human beings follow it into that environment, and not just follow it, but survive the journey and arrive somewhere worth arriving, that day is still far. But it is not infinitely far. It is separated from us not by impossibility, but by understanding. We are accumulating the understanding. The journey will wait.